Discrimination still exists for women in 2017. This is especially true for Black women in Boston, specifically in their places of work. For Kina Banda, this issue hits close to home.
I was working as a dental assistant in the dental department, and on Friday afternoons, we typically didn't have patients. And so my colleague and I were called into a meeting at like 4:59. And I explained to the director at that time, I said, I have a prior engagement after work on Friday. Is this something that can wait till Monday? And he was very adamant about it. He says, no, we all need to meet now. And so my other colleague, who happened to be a white woman, slightly older than I was, also said, oh no, I've got to go because I'm going skiing. And I didn't disclose exactly what it is that I had to do for that day. And he replied, no, we all need to meet. But the other colleague was allowed to go. And so during the meeting, after he had finished whatever it is that he wanted to say, I sort of outed him. And I said to him, you know what? I'm really unhappy that you would choose to allow one of us the privilege to leave and not myself.
What Banda encountered next made her feel even more like a target.
I think it was Monday or Tuesday, he called me into his office and actually wrote me up for it. And he said, you know what, I'm giving you this written warning that you were insubordinate during the meeting. He said, but you're smart. And I know that what I did was unfair, but it was the way that you decided to go up against what my leadership was that brought us to this.
A 2013 study entitled Vaulting the Color Bar showed that a mere 11% of Black women had a top executive advocate for them in their workplace. And it's data like this that validates Banda's struggle with her director and many other Black women fighting for sponsorship in their places of work.
This isn't about race, creed, or color. It's about justice. And that was an unfair handling of that particular situation. So I thought it was discriminatory in the fact that we were both women, right? She happened to be white, I happened to be Black, and we were doing the same job title.
Carol Simpson has been a pivotal pioneer for Black women in the field of journalism for decades, and she's been doing so most recently in Boston. As the first woman of color to ever moderate a presidential debate and anchor a major television network evening newscast, Simpson recalls how being discriminated against in the workplace made her feel.
It's a virulent and very self-defeating kind of thing. You end up wondering whether you're good enough or strong enough or whatever to fulfill a job, because they are discriminating against you. They are setting you aside, putting you on a shelf, and treating you differently than everyone else.
Simpson believes that negative depictions of Black women throughout history have played a dominant role in this issue.
If you look at some social science studies, they will say that the hierarchy in our society is white men at the top, Black men second, white women third, and Black women are at the bottom of the totem pole. I think it goes back to Black women were the mammies, they were the housekeepers, and they were the nannies, and they were always seen in subservient positions and categories. They think of Black women and it's like Aunt Jemima, or they think of them as easy. That Black women are easy mark, they're sexually promiscuous. There are so many stereotypes against Black women. And I think society has not completely gotten rid of that.
Speaking up in the workplace has proven to be a double-edged sword. Adding gender into the mix creates an even more daunting situation, and why women of color have opted to stay hidden, like this local sales associate who was asked to remain unidentified in order to share her story.
With my previous employer, after I left, they hired someone in a higher position. So I was more of an assistant position. And then they hired him in a director position that they told me did not exist, would not ever exist at my current place. And then I come to find out he was only doing like 3/4 of the work that I was doing. So I felt that was a huge discrimination, especially after I was fighting so hard for 3 years to get a promotion, to get a bonus, to get a decent raise. And here comes this person making practically twice as much and not doing as much work. So I thought that was a huge discrimination against me. I had to leave because I just wasn't making enough money with everything I was contributing.
This young woman also explained that racial stereotypes still make it hard for Black women in the workplace to stand up for themselves. She says their passion is taken out of context, which is why she also wishes to not be identified.
So since I am still in the job market looking for opportunities, I'm just afraid of backlash that may come for it, especially during these times where people are very sensitive about race and culture, I guess you can say. Complaining or even making a stance on something that's racially centered, I guess, could receive some backlash. So I guess just not wanting my name associated with it.
Kim McLaren is a critically acclaimed novelist living in the Boston area who appears on the Emmy Award-winning show Basic Black. Her personal experiences with discrimination in the workplace motivated her to write her first book, Taming It Down.
I was a journalist for a long time. I was a journalist at that time, and I'd spent 10 years working in journalism, ending up at the New York Times. And every step of the way was a battle as a Black woman, not just for me, but for my friends, in terms of trying to climb the career ladder like anybody else and being confronted not only with sexism, but with racism, the double, intersectionality that Black women face. So, there are a lot of what we call now microaggressions that I could bore you with and, that I encountered, but just everything from not being given the same assignments, not being promoted, being constantly questioned as to your competence.
In addition to the mental impact racial discrimination can have on Black women, McLaren says the physical effects are the most troubling.
Racial discrimination takes a physical toll on Black women and contributes to things like we have higher infant mortality, lower birth rate babies, breast care, all the terrible health care outcomes that Black women have are not just economic issues. They're directly related to the stress of being a Black woman in this society. So it's a very real thing. It's a sociological issue that has physical, emotional, financial, economic impact on Black women. To me, there's no question about that. That's not even arguable. It's just fact, and it's backed up with lots of data.
That's where organizations like YW Boston come in, providing women in the Boston area with resources that they might need to battle this issue.
YW Boston, our mission is to eliminate racism, empower women, and promote peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. It's a lot that we are trying to do, and ultimately we are trying to empower people and educate them and get people mobilized to take action to address systemic issues in Boston.
Chandler believes that everyone, not just Black women, must work together to resolve this issue.
Our philosophy is for issues of racism, if people of color could address them by themselves, they would have. And so how can we get all people together to think about what are some of the underlying issues that are going on that people might not even be aware of? Eliminating racism is an important thing in the city, and I think recently Michael Che from Saturday Night Live said how Boston is, in his mind, the most racist city in the country. So there's still, whether it's reality or perception, there is this idea that Boston is still struggling with issues of race. And if we can't address that, then the city as a whole is not going to be able to really reach its potential. Because the only way the city can reach its potential is if every citizen has the opportunity to be the best that they can be. And so by eliminating racism here in the city, we will ultimately make Boston a better place for everybody.